And that's how you make it. Got it? No? Well, then let's try again! The art of voodoo has been founded and created many centuries ago by people I do not know or care about. I created my own method and I'm going to share with you today, because I love you, every single one of you little bastards. Okay, let's take it a tad bit slower this time around. We're gonna start with the head, cause, well, most people believe it is actually the place where one's soul resides. At least that's what Celtic people believed. You start doing it by wrapping a little bundle like this around your fingers. 3 fingers should be good enough. Then you wrap it up diagonally, just like this. Once you feel like you have enough, you take the leftover ends and tie them up together, just so they would make somewhat of a circular shape. I say somewhat, it's gonna become more circular later. As you go on, make sure everything is as tight as humanly possible without actually breaking the thread. At this point you should cut the thread. However, I have done that before, cause on my earlier takes of this video it became more troublesome than I could have ever imagined, and that's something. Here I make a knot that is then later going to support the skeleton of our little creature. You can never be too sure with it. And as before, you have to tie it up as tight as humanly possible. And make sure it goes through the middle. As if it's dangling slightly to the left or right, it's gonna mess up the whole thing later. Now that it sits like this, we have to make another one diagonal to it. It ensures that it's not going to move, that our end isn't going to move around the whole thing. Here you only have to make one knot like this. And as always, make it tight. Now that it sits pretty damn tightly, we can start. First I will show off how much thread you actually need for something like this. Usually you should get somewhere around 5 lengths of your arm. That's the easiest measurement. That's the easiest measurement I can tell. You don't need as much, but it never hurts to have more. Okay, now that I have this out of the way, I'll show the basis for the skeleton of our victim. Here are our future hands, or how much we're gonna need for our hands, and here how much we're gonna need for our legs and the body. This is how it looks right now. It's gonna look better, I promise. This is how long it is when you stretch it out. And now we have to attach it so that 2 pieces of thread go out of the head. It's important because otherwise your head might just snap off from the rest of the body. And if you're torturing somebody, snapping the head isn't really the thing you want to do, really. Not really. It defeats the whole purpose of torturing someone. And as always, at least one nut, so it sits in place. There is no real rule how to make it happen, how to make it, let's say, for sure that it's going to stay tight. If it's going to stay tight, it's gonna stay tight. Let's leave it at that. And if it doesn't, you can always fix it. You can almost always fix it later. So there is no problem with that. Now we can finally start with our arms, if this thing will finally work with me. If something goes like out, if a thread that's going diagonally goes a little bit to the left or right, make sure to bring it back to the middle. And I'm making one more knot just to make sure that it's going to stay in place. Sometimes you don't need any of those. Sometimes you may need 2 or 3 in this place. This place is really important, because if something messes up in here, the whole project is basically squandered. Okay, now that that is done, we can finally get to our limbs. You make a little loopy loop like this one, and then get confused, and then you take, yes, that's how long it is going to be. And now we wrap it around in a really tight spiral. I'm gonna show it in, just in a minute how easy this actually is, because the pattern on the thread does most of the job for you. Here, the only thing I'm really doing is supporting the skeleton and twisting around the head. The rest is done by the pattern itself. See, I don't even need to hold it. I'm just so pro at this. Okay, at the end you want to leave just a little tiny loopy loop left, so you can get the thread to another side, to the dark side. You take the end, put it through, like through the eye of the needle, and take all of it through. And I mean all of it. Now just make it tight, as always, as you do. And now you wrap it around in the same direction as you were wrapping it around earlier. It may seem confusing at first, but in fact, the thread will not let you tie it up in any other way. Otherwise, it's just going to start to untie itself. So it's smarter than you are. We have to stop it before it's too late. As you get to the head, you run into some problems and immediately solve them, because that's how it goes. You take the another thread that is going out of the head and make the basis for another arm. You see, it's not the same one. It's different, but it's exactly the same. It has to be the same. Otherwise, it's gonna be weird. And you do it exactly the same as you were making the first hand. Also by twisting and by holding and doing almost nothing in reality. You run into some problems midway because the thread won't stay in one place on the head, but you just have to put it back in the middle where it belongs, and then you get back to it. It's not really too much of a problem if you let go of the thread for a couple seconds, because whatever you have, if you have tied it down earlier pretty tightly, it's gonna stay somewhere around the same place. You just need to tighten it up as you pick it up, and it should be okay. You can also help yourself with some sort of needle or something like that, something sharp and pointy. And as on earlier arm, we take it through all of it. Now it's a little less. It's still a lot. It's still too much, but I don't care. You shouldn't either. Whenever there is a knot on the thread, don't worry. If it's usually something that can be resolved with some minor difficulties. Not anything too dangerous. If it came to be by itself, it can sustain itself by itself. If it came to be as itself, that's pretty deep. Okay, let's now have a look at what we have accomplished so far. It so does not look like a human. We have to strangle it. We have to make a noose around its neck. It will ensure that the hands stay in one position. Just a safety measurement. Make sure it's tight, as always. Now we can finally get to the body. How you make the body is actually really simple. It's almost the same as making arms. However, you need to add an additional layer. Though that doesn't really make it anything more difficult, because the additional layer can be laid out as you please. It doesn't have to be against or with the spiral on the surface. You only have to worry about the way the spiral goes every second layer. So let's say the third one and the fifth one don't really matter where they go because its basis is already stable. Let's say it smartly like that. I are smart. Now, because there is no loopy-loop to go through, we go through this victim's crotch. You don't really have to make sure that the loopy-loops are even at this point. You can change it later. And now we do the same as with arms, in that we go with the in the same direction as the spiral was going before. I am so pro at this. Okay, now something really useful. Make an X out of the thread on the chest of your victim. It will make sure that the arms and the body stay in one line and one does not go on top of one another. It just makes them more stiff. Make one in the front and also in the back. As with those kinds of things, you're never sure which end is actually going to be the front or the back until you finish them. And now we go backwards. Actually, well, yeah, backwards, forwards, however you want to say it. As you see, it doesn't really matter which way you go because the body is already stable with two of those layers of thread. Okay, and now as we approach the end of our journey, we start making legs. 'Cause that's how I roll. There is no real trick to starting the basis of the leg. You just go with it, sort of. You have to find your own way. Every project is a little bit different. Making legs is in fact the same as making arms. However, here I'm going to showcase also something different to what I did with arms or the body, as I am going to make my legs a little bit thinner. You do that by basically not making the spiral as dense. You can also do that with hands or as a matter of fact for the second layer of almost anything, any limb you're gonna be doing. It's not gonna be as thick. It's also not gonna, in some cases it's also not going to be as stable. However, with something as short as the legs, it's not gonna be so much of an issue. I'm trying to showcase it as hard as I can, but it's just hard to see it, as the thread is the same color as the thread. You can sort of see it here. There is also no trick to going to the second leg. You just need to get it through, sort of like with the hands. You see, everything is the same. Here I also will be able to illustrate a little bit better how I make the legs a little bit thinner, with making the spiral a little less dense. You see, instead of let's say 14 or 15 spirals going like right next to one another, I make just 2. Works just as well when it's short, but it may cause the construction to become a little bit distorted if it's a little bit longer. Now we make a couple more ties around the belly of the beast. Skip the chest. We don't want to make him look too good. And wrap another noose around his or her neck. I just really feel like strangling someone today. Make sure it sits tight, as everything and everything And we're golden. And that's how you make it. Got it? No? Then rewind the video yourself. I'm done.